Hey everyone. This week we're talking, I always say we. I don't know if I'm just modest. It's really I. You're listening, we're listening, I'll be listening later, and I'm talking to a virologist here in the UK, which is pretty awesome considering we've been dealing with a virus for almost a year now. She's also a comedian. I met her as a comedian and quickly found out what she did for a living and was super intrigued by it. So I wanted to talk to her about COVID. Now, she's not a COVID virologist, but just is in that field, which is pretty awesome because someone went from science to comedy, which is just something that I think is really cool. There are all kinds of different people doing creative things that work in different industries and different careers. And some people are happy in their career. She likes her career, but also likes doing comedy. Another thing, though, is we get into a little bit of talk about mental health, specifically pure OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder. It's the first time she's shared this in any sort of forum. I just always think that having these discussions about real and serious issues is important. I think sharing our stories is super important. One way that we can heal and one way that we just can live full lives is through connection. I connect through volunteerism, for example, and I connect with friends, and I connect even through this podcast. I think for me, this is a form of connection. Other people connect in other ways. My guest sharing her story, first of all, I'm very grateful she decided to do that here with me and with you, but also just my guest sharing her story really, I think the biggest thing is that that's going to form a connection with some people who may have experienced something, or maybe you'll hear about it and go, hey, that's what's going on with me. I didn't realize that's what was going on with me. Maybe I should go talk to someone. It'll normalize things. I think one of the most important things we can do is normalize things like mental health and things like addiction. I just attended tonight. This is Martin Luther King Days when I'm recording this. Tonight I attended a session with Shatterproof, an organization that's very dear to me, and again made a pledge to try to destigmatize addiction. So my point is, again, through connection and through sharing our stories, we can normalize some things that have been stigmatized. One of them is mental health. This guest is awesome. I think you're going to love her. I do. So you'll hear some music and then we'll get right into the interview. Thanks for being here with me. Welcome to More Than Work, the podcast reminding you that your self-worth is defined by more than your job title. I'm Rabia, an IT project manager, comedian, nonprofit volunteer, and sometimes activist. Every week, I'll chat with a guest about pursuing passions outside of work or creating meaningful opportunities inside their workplace. As you listen, I hope you'll be inspired to do the same. This is the first time I'm going to introduce someone as doctor on this podcast, so welcome back this week, everyone. And this guest, you'll want to definitely pay attention to, not only because you should pay attention to every guest, but also this person actually does know what they're talking about in the area of viruses, which we all know has been a thing for us for the last year. So my guest is Dr. Lisa Cross. She's a full-time scientist and part-time comedian. And our chat will be pretty much part-time science and full-time comedy maybe, but we'll see. So Lisa, welcome. And thanks for being on the podcast.
Well, thank you for inviting me. This is very exciting. And I've just been really looking forward to it and really want to tell everyone about what I do. We'll just talk about me, really, basically. Love it. Just want to talk a bit about science, a lot about comedy, just really looking forward to it. Thank you.
Yeah, awesome. So do you want to just anything you want to start off with from your perspective as far as just telling people about maybe a little bit about your background?
Okay, so I am a medical microbiologist, particularly virology. I have been for, 20 odd years. I have worked for the government for all that time. I've worked at Public Health England. I developed, my job there was to develop tests and assays to detect pathogens quicker. So I've developed tests for like plague. I've measured people's responses to smallpox, just anything microbiological I have done. I now don't live in London. I live in the southwest of England. And I again work for the government in a marine institution. And I'm no longer actually a bench scientist because, and I always tell people, because I used to work on norovirus, which is the virus that is spread through feces. Nice. And yeah, so that was what my PhD was on, which I really enjoyed. And that's what brought me to CFAS, because that particular virus can be spread through eating oysters, because people have it in their system and it goes through sewage and it goes out to sea, and that's what oysters are. So that was the connection there. But I went from 13 years at Public Health England and then went back to CFAS and was still a bench scientist. And then there was one particular moment that I thought I need to change my career slightly, in that obviously, as I said, norovirus is spread through feces, so you handle a lot of human excrement. And I was looking at, and it was really interesting, the research that I was doing, but really hard actually, looking at how can we tell if norovirus is infectious, because like unlike other viruses, and I think SARS-CoV-2 you can culture, but norovirus you can't. So you do this PCR test, as I think like all of the population now knows, like they did 20 years ago, like I'll say PCR, people are like, yay. But you can detect it, but you don't know whether it's infectious. So we were trying to find ways, and people still are, of trying to prove how infectious the virus is. So anyway, to cut a long story short, we were trying to do that with, and this is very niche, looking at the inside of pig stomachs, pig mucin, because that binds to norovirus. And if it binds, it means the capsid, which is like the coat of the virus, is still intact, and therefore the virus would be infectious. So I was there one day in the containment level 3 laboratory, and to do this, you had to bind these beads that had the inside of pig stomachs to the bit of human excrement, and that took a bit of time, and you had to put on this like rotary thing. Yep, not very funny, but that was the thing that had to happen. But then that broke one day. So throughout my lunch break, I was there with 2 tubes doing that for an hour, to replicate like the going round. And I thought, do you know what? I don't want to do this anymore.
And what Lisa's showing is she's just kind of almost like shaking a small, like if you could think about like an airplane cocktail bottle, maybe, and just kind of shifting it back and forth, like to shake it up, maybe.
Yeah.
So, and you were doing that with human excrement.
Yes. And I thought, I don't want to do this anymore. So at the time in my workplace, we were restructuring. And then I decided to go into more scientific project management, which I think you're a project manager too. Is that good?
I'm a project manager, yes. And sometimes I feel like I'm dealing with, crap all day.
You probably are. So, for the past few years, I still work in a government science institution, but I'm a portfolio manager, and I manage all our R&D, and I have a team of project managers. And crucially, I am not in a very small room by myself, tilting small containers of poo. And I think I am better at my role that I have now, because it took me 20 years to figure this out, but I'm quite a chatty person. I like communicating with people, and I think particularly bench research science can be quite, solitary. It can be, rewarding in so many ways, but I prefer the role I have now, that I still have an overview of science, but I'm not the person in a small room in a lab coat with tiny tubes putting microliters of substance into another tube. I get to communicate, which is something that I love. So.
Oh, that's awesome. So I like that you were able to stay in science, which you love, but then just do it in a totally different way. And it sounds like your job, I mean, when you say you're a bench scientist, that means just like purely like doing lab work at that point?
Yeah, okay. Just pipetting all the time. And I think the thing with science is I've always loved it, since I was 9, but to be an amazing scientist, you need to publish. And I was just terrible at writing papers. I can talk, but I can't write papers. And without writing papers, you can't, I've written a few, but you can't proceed to the upper echelons of science, really. So I was like, after a while, I was like, this isn't really working. So here we are.
Yeah. So then, and we're not going to spend the whole time on COVID, but just a little bit, because we're all spending all our time on that anyway, but just a little bit. So when you're looking at something like what's happened this year, that's probably made you a little bit more busy, I guess.
Busy personally, because I'm really interested in it.
Mm-hmm.
But from a sort of work perspective, although my organisation does contribute to it, because I'm not in Public Health England anymore. I'm not, on the front line, but we're busy in different ways. I don't know if you've heard, but just there's lots of research going into analysing wastewater, i.e. sewage, effluent, to see what's in there. And that's really exciting. And my organisation is doing that. And I'm, again, not involved on the front line, but in terms of project management, I am. So, but yeah, just busy. I've been busy for 10 months reading about it, because I've kind of, mm-hmm. fascinated and scared in equal measure, really. So busy reading about it constantly. So
one thing that would be interesting, at least to me, and I think to other people, is one thing we've heard, and I'll say how you react to this statement, that, things have changed so much and we don't know what to believe now. Like, we were told not to wear a mask in last March, and now we're supposed to. And, I personally have been wearing a mask the entire time. I kind of welcomed it in a way. I have rosacea, so it actually made it easier for me to go out, more efficiently, right? Like, I don't have to put on makeup. I just go out, put a mask. But, but what, just in your experience with researching viruses, why would that happen? Why would, for example, and a lot of people who listen to this are from America, so Dr. Fauci, who's become, at least America's doctor, yes, said you don't need to wear a mask. And who said that? And now they say you do. How does something like that happen?
I guess it's just always a balancing act, isn't it, between trying to make people compliant, trying to make people not scared. At the beginning, with masks, and we all know now that wearing one is more about protecting other people than yourself. I think that was part of it as well. But I sort of sat at home and was very, oh my goodness, let's just get this message straight. I was really frustrated by it. I've been wearing a mask for a long time as well. But yeah, I don't know is the answer. It just seems crazy. It's just been such a mixed message. Yeah, I don't know. Have you got anything?
Well, it varies country to country too, and like in the U.S., it varies state to state, which is weird. But here, it's one. In the U.K., where we both are, it's just like one message, but that changes. But when you did research on viruses, you would be studying the same virus for how many years? And then you would find something new, yeah, right? Like, so it's kind of interesting. Like, it's only been a year, so of course new information is going to become available. Right?
Yes, absolutely. And like from the time when I did the television program to now, we now know, because there's been more studies, we now know how long it potentially lasts on surfaces. And so I was probably, we could probably reduce the times that I was talking about, just because there's been more papers, there's been more studies. But in terms of mass, and don't get me wrong, I don't fully understand physics, but the aerosolation and droplets and the whole mechanics of that hasn't changed. So I don't, I don't understand the confusion at the beginning and the continued confusion of that, because that just always remains the same, basically. So regardless of the pathogen, yeah.
Yeah, and speaking of the show, so let's talk about a documentary you were involved with in creating. How Clean Is Your House? It was on Channel 4 here in the UK, and people can still see it online. It's still online, so it's pretty cool to see, actually, especially for people who like to watch like reality TV and people having to do things in their homes. I think a lot of people like to see other people's homes, but I have friends who would clean all their like Amazon packages, clean all their groceries, whatever, every single time up until like very recently. And then some never did it at all. But just talk about what you were just saying with the timelines and How Clean Is Your House, and maybe just about that project, because it was pretty cool to watch.
So, yeah, I was just really lucky, basically. I had previously, a couple of years prior to that, done another Channel 4 project called The Great British Germ Hunt. And the irony of that was that myself and another scientist and Kate Quilton, we were talking about microbiomes and we still do, by the way, but how we need to embrace bacteria, particularly bacteria, and how that's good for us, and how maybe we're sanitizing our homes too much. And we spent 3 days at a festival and analyzed people's microbiomes and sequenced them and saw how much bacterial diversity they had. And we know how like your gut microbiome links to your brain. It's incredibly interesting. And so I spent all that time on one particular program saying, yeah, get down with your dirt, embrace bacteria. And now I'm like, bleach everything, kill it. So that was quite funny, because it was some of the same crew that had filmed the previous program. They were like, oh, you're back, are you? And now what you're going to say? And I'm like, yeah, no, disinfect everything. But obviously in a pandemic, everything changes, and everything that we said in the first show still stands. So I had done that, and then I was approached to do this new corona thing, and this was in March, and we had to turn it around really quickly. I mean, I don't have much experience of TV, but it was like in 6 weeks from beginning to end, which is enormously quick. And it was really challenging, because obviously we had to socially distance, and we managed it under quite extreme pressure. I was gutted, because for the first time in my life I was going to get like a hair and makeup artist, but then of course they were like, oh, sorry, we can't do that. And I'm like, oh god damn it. But yeah, no, so it was a really, really interesting project to work on, and I had so much input into it, and yeah, I'm really proud of it. Basically, it was great.
Yeah, and do you now, like, just talking about how timelines changed for how long the virus can live on items like cardboard or clothes or whatever, do you continue in your home to like wipe everything down, or
yes.
Do you just
so can absolutely continue to do that, basically, and it's such a pain in the butt. It really is. I hate it. It puts so much time on going to the supermarket or getting a delivery, but I have still done that. And I think my parents are shielding, so they still do it, but compared to other friends, I think particularly in the summer, they all thought I was slightly barking mad. But absolutely continue to. We have got like a quarantine station in the hall where we put stuff like tins of tomatoes or whatever, and just wash stuff down with just soapy water. But now, because I got COVID at this particular point in time, am I doing that? No, and that is very, very freeing.
Yeah, because you had it really recently.
Yes.
You had COVID over break. I was going to say over break, but we were all adults, so we don't really get break necessarily.
Yeah. So not doing that at the moment, but I guess the $1 million question is, when will I, prior to an actual vaccination, when will I stop this interim period of not caring about it and thinking, because I don't know how long my antibodies will last.
Right.
I've got a son who's 9 and was in the house with me and my partner over the time that we were sick, and I think my level of hygiene is quite good. I have to say, like, compared to the documentary, as time went on, I wasn't, every time someone used like a remote control, getting the ethanol wet wipe and wiping it down, or doing we just didn't. Do you know what I mean? That didn't
Right.
happen. But then when I realised we were both sick, we upped it again, and like my partner would have the remote control, and then so before my son did it, I would wipe it down. But with all the best will in the world, like over Christmas, we were all in the same house, and I don't think my son didn't get infected, but he was definitely asymptomatic. So I think we all had it. I didn't get my son tested because he didn't have symptoms. I didn't want to waste a test, blah, blah, blah. So now we're in this wonderful, gosh, that's so 2021, isn't it? I'm in this wonderful period, but I'm not shampooing, my aggressor is. God almighty. But yeah, I don't know. I don't know when to then up it again. It's weird, isn't it?
Yeah.
I really don't know. And it's something, I don't worry about it, but I do think, I don't know. I have been so careful for so long. And I've been saying to everyone, like, my quarantine ended the beginning of last week. And I was just so excited to then do stuff. I was willing for the first time in 10 months. I just wanted to go to TK Maxx. That's all I wanted to do. I love that shop so much. I was just going to hang about in there. I was going to pick up shampoos and look at them and buy plant pots, and it was going to be amazing. And then I was going to take the 3 of us to go for a meal somewhere inside, which is not something that we've done for 10 weeks. Yeah. And then on the Tuesday morning, I literally text messaged my hairdresser and was like, book me in, because I haven't had a hair appointment in months and months and months. And I'm like, I'm coming. And and then by the evening, no, not doing any of that. So for me, it's such a weird, I've been really nervous about it, and cautious, as a virologist would be, for so long. And then I've got this brief respite of, I've got antibodies and bravery. And no, you can't do anything, Lisa. You can't. You can go for a walk, right?
Yeah. Yeah, no, and the quarantining is so much different than just like doing the stay-at-home order itself, where you have to really, like, I had to quarantine because of possible exposure.
Oh, did you?
To the virus? Yeah, and I don't know. It was I'm doing the test track and trace app, and so for people who don't know, here in the UK, we have an app where you just scan a QR code and check into places you go, and it's really helping the government have data. I mean, is the bottom line, and informative for them. I mean, it's not really doing much for us unless you get that message on your phone. You have to quarantine for 6 days. And so I had to do that right before Christmas. And it was a lot different to not be able to walk outside versus being able to go outside and exercise. I mean, it was really hard, and so these people who have been shielding for months who aren't even allowed outside. I don't know. I don't know how they're doing it and coping, because I think I'm coping because I can go for a walk, so I'm glad you're free-ish.
Absolutely. I mean, I've got members of my family, like I said, my parents have been shielding. I mean, they still go for a drive to, say to Exmoor. Well, they can't now, but, over the summer that, they would go to Exmoor to go for a walk. I've got a cousin who is very highly autoimmune and is on steroids, who like properly can't do anything. And my heart just goes out to her. She lives alone, and it just must be just crippling. I can't. I know it's really hard for her. So my heart goes out to these people so much. It's just so hard. And I think, when I know people who have had to endure this for so long, and then I just get so angry when I see people, you know, flouting rules, because I just think, oh, you know, these people are, it's hellish. But yeah.
Yeah. No, well, I appreciate you sharing all this, because I think it's just helpful to talk to someone who is in science, who has been and is continuing to follow these guidelines. And maybe we all don't agree with 100% of them or understand them all, but it's just kind of like, at least we'll be through it at some point.
I tell you, I don't think anyone's understanding them. It was towards the end of last year, and it was before I got ill. Myself and my colleague and friend, we were trying to work out the rules, because I think she was worried that her husband had been exposed in a hardware store, and then we were trying to work it out. And then literally, so two medical microbiologists were like, "No, I don't know, mate. I don't know." And she was like, "If we don't know." So I really don't know what you're meant to do now. It's if we can't work it out, then goodness. So
yeah, it's really hard. The thing we know is you can't go to a rave.
You most certainly cannot do that. No.
Right. We know that.
I'm in my 40s, and I don't think they'd let me in anyway.
I know. Yeah. It's kind of nice to age out of that stuff, isn't it? And now that both of us, I mean, I haven't done my hair color. I added some blue one day for fun, but I haven't done mine in a while. And I'm seeing this gray, and I'm like, oh, I'm aging out, and I'm not even pretending not to.
Yay!
Anymore, you know, we're done. So we've talked through your career, and the way we met is really through comedy.
Really?
And so, yeah, let's talk about comedy and how you got into that.
Yeah.
And how that's maybe changed how you looked at your work too. But
so comedy is the absolute love of my life. It's everything to me. I can see you nodding. It makes the darkest days brighter, whether that's me doing it or me watching it. I'm an absolute super fan, and it's something that I always wanted to do. And I was one of those people that always spoke about it. Like, so basically I'm an absolute textbook stand-up comedian, I think, from what I've read, in that I was bullied at school really badly, didn't have any friends at all, had really low self-esteem, really doubted myself. And that was when between the ages of sort of 9 and 12, it went on a really long time. And I just fell in love with comedy, and it was my escape. And then at school, and again, textbook, my way out of being bullied was to be funny. And, you know, so I've always been the funny person from, you know, the first or second year of comprehensive school. And then that just grew and grew. And yeah, I always, you know, in the pub, I was always the person making jokes. No, you should do stand up. And I'm like, oh, I don't know. And then talked about it. And then for 10 years was like, oh, I might go on a stand up, because I lived in London, on a stand up comedy course. Oh, it's quite a lot of money. I don't know. And then just never got round to it. Just bored people to tears about it, but didn't ever do it. And then I had my son in 2011. And then in 2013, I was like, but I'm going to do it. So I signed up for the comedy school in Camden and did a 6-week course. And it was just life-changing. I absolutely loved it. And it was just, I just remember in the first 10 minutes of the first lesson, just that feeling of like, this is going to sound like really, but I was like, oh my God, I'm actually good at this. This is me, these people. And it was so nice to be in a room with so many different types of people, but I'm like, oh, this is my tribe. I get this. I love this. And we did it every Sunday morning, sometimes hungover, sometimes not. And then at the end of it, we had to do our comedy showcase. And that was amazing. And that was quite emotional for me also, because like a couple of weeks prior to that, I just had a miscarriage, not to bring them. But I mean, it's what happened. the tone down, but that's life, isn't it? And that was really devastating to me. And I always remember my comedy school teacher, I confided in him that on the night I was like, oh God, this happened and I'm heartbroken. He said the comedy will set you free. And that sounds like such an Instagram meme, doesn't it? But I was like, at that moment I realized, yeah, it will, it totally will. And I did the gig. I was really nervous. And I did it, and I still look back on the video now and think, that was quite good actually. And I was like, yeah, I'm definitely going to do that. And I was lucky to live in London, although I had like a 2-year-old son, and my partner's a firefighter, so I couldn't gig as much as I could have done maybe in my 20s because I couldn't get out of the house. Yeah. But then a lot of people have said, well, would you have been so good in your 20s because you just have more life experience to bring to it? So I didn't gig as much as a lot of my friends did. A lot of my friends on the scene back in like sort of 2013, 2014, now I've been on Mock the Week, and I'm like, oh look, these are people I know. And I'm never going to be that. I'm never going to be a professional comedian, but I'm always going to love it. So yeah, I just did the open mic scene in London, did competitions, did quite well, did like Funny Women, got to like the quarterfinals of that, and it was just really validating, really lovely that I have this hobby that makes me meet new people, and it's just everything to me. It really is.
And I would say that's similar to my story in comedy. And what I like though is that you're just kind of, you started to judge yourself a little bit and then realized you had to stop, and that's kind of the comparison thing, right? It's in anything. And I almost see that as a theme when you look at your career too. You're like, well, I'm not going to be this kind of scientist. I'm not writing all the papers and stuff. I'm going to get into a place in science that's better for me, where I'm really successful and happy. And then same with comedy. I mean, I think the minute you're not comparing yourself to other comedians, it's better, and you can make friends easier too. I don't know if you've noticed that, but like, if you're not jealous of people, you can be friends with them.
Yeah.
Much easier.
Yeah, that's a thing. That's a thing. Like, I love it, what you're doing. Then I hate you. You're so much better than me. Yeah.
So with the comedy, and that being really important to you, has that helped you at all with like your work-life balance? And how has having comedy in your life just kind of changed maybe or enhanced it and your relationship with your work?
Definitely helped it and a millionfold, for so many reasons. Just more confidence, I mean, the classic, like if you're doing a presentation or you're chairing a meeting, I have more confidence in doing that. Not all the time. I still, really don't like chairing meetings. It's really hard. But yeah, just having more confidence. And I would also say, I was saying to someone the other day, when you go on like a work training course and you're all sat there and there's people that you don't know, and then you have to pair up with someone that you don't know. And then it's an absolute classic, isn't it? They go, okay, chat to each other for 5 minutes, write stuff down, and then find out 2 or 3 things about this person that nobody would know. I'm like that, rubbing my hands. Bring it on. I'm going to say I'm a stand-up comedian. No one's going to and I just absolutely love it. And so that's it. It's worth its weight in gold just to be able to go on training courses and then go, I'm a stand-up comedian, and then everyone going, oh my gosh, that's amazing. Love that. But it's awful when I have to go with colleagues that know me because they so know that's coming, and I'm just in the front, and they're like, oh Jesus, she's got it. And there, she's just said it. There she is, and she's smiling and she's loving it. Oh right, okay, crossing. But yeah, no, just more confidence, really. I think definitely confidence coming from standing on a stage and talking and really putting yourself out there. And sometimes in my comedy I talk about really personal stuff, sometimes I don't, but that can only be a positive thing and translate into your work, where you have to interact with people, and particularly in project management. My job now, as we said famously, is not 2 tubes of poo in my hand, but I have to communicate with people, and I have to lead. I have to be a strong leader. I have to do a lot of things, and stand-up comedy absolutely aids that. Definitely.
And it is funny because it's kind of like that whole thing, like vegans always say they're vegan. And I feel like comedians joke about that, but then always say they're comedians,
Lovely. Yeah, that is completely and utterly true. I will add another one into that mix. People that go wild swimming in winter, they will always tell everyone that they go wild swimming in the sea in winter. That's just, yes. It's the trio.
That's true. And in the last season I had Carrie Ann Payne on, who she brought open water swimming to the UK in a way because she was a silver medalist. Oh, wow. In the Olympics for that. But I'd say, like, even the first time I met her, I met her in person at one point, and the first time I met her, I think that was one of the first things I heard. So you're right. Yeah. And I think it's great, but it's just, we all have these things we want to make sure people know about us.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Within, knowing me for 10 minutes, you will know that I do stand up for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm just curious now. And how do you handle the question or the request? Tell me a joke. Do you have like one you just, because I don't know, people say
I do. And the thing is, everyone thinks it's crap, but I love it. And it's really not very good. But now it's become such a staple joke that I do, and it's kind of pun-based basically. And I just do that, and it involves a bit of singing, so it makes everyone super awkward. I just do that. Yeah.
I need to get one in my holster. I have my friends' kids will be like, say something funny, and then they know I'll say, well, I don't have any kids jokes, and then they'll be like, you got to write some kids jokes. Like, they're requesting that, because I go, I've tried to clean up, and I'm not that bad. I don't think you are either, really, with like being that blue, but it's just that it's not stuff kids get either. So it's funny to try to turn your jokes into kids jokes. I think it's really hard.
On that theme, I mean, obviously we didn't this year, but I do stand-up comedy at the Dorchester Beer and Cider Festival here in Dorset. Big up the Cider Festival. And there's a comedy tent. And as I said, my partner's is a firefighter, so he's often away. So childcare is always a pain in the ass. And I was doing that one year, and it's in the afternoon, and there's big signs saying, do not bring your children in here. There will be, swearing, etc. So my son, I think, was about 7 at the time. And then my friend was looking after him, and I was like, I've just got to go on now. And I thought she was taking him away. So I started my set, and not terrible, but I do a joke about getting my boobs stuck behind a radiator. Classic. And then he heard that, and then he has just spoken about that so much that we would get taxis around town, and then just out of nowhere he would go, do you know my mum? She's a stand-up comedian, and once she got her boobs stuck behind a radiator, and I was like, oh, how did this happen? That's really weird. You're going to think I'm insane. And also, bless him, I think he's got the bug a little bit too. So he's like 9.5 now. He'll be 10 in a couple of months. And he writes little jokes. And he says, if I get a paid gig, which we know is few and far between and not a lot of money, but he was like, if you say my joke, will you give me £1? So he's like written these really quite cute little jokes. I'm really proud of him.
Oh, that's so great. And it's like he's good at just distilling the joke down to its exact thing. That's awesome. So one thing that I thought was interesting too is something that on this podcast we've talked about mental health a bit, but more on the depression anxiety side, but not something that you are open to talking about, which is pure OCD, which is not the OCD we think of or even people joke about, but it's a different kind. So can you just talk a little bit about that and just...
Yeah, of course. So this is quite a big thing for me because I have never spoken about it publicly before. I've never spoken about it in my stand-up. Those people that are closest to me know that I have it, but I just thought, no, I need to speak about it. So basically, since I was 9 or 10, I had just normal common garden OCD, that whole, if I don't turn the light switch on and off, then my mum will die.
Mm-hmm.
And I had that for many, many years. And that involved rituals, obsessions and compulsions and rituals of turning light switches on and off and tapping things. And that got to be slightly unbearable when the trigger that made me go for treatment was I was part of the diagnostic response for swine flu, influenza H1N1 in 2009, I think. And then because I worked at Public Health England then, and then we were on pagers and mobile phones, and we had to come into the lab at like 2 a.m. and then sequence the viruses that were coming in. You were by yourself, and it was really stressful. And my OCD just went absolutely mental because of the stress. And I was like, I can't do this anymore. So I went to see my GP, and she was like, you definitely have OCD. And then I had, because it was NHS, there was, I had to wait a couple of months, but I then got treatment and I had cognitive behavioural therapy, CBT. And the point I want to make is, oh my goodness, that worked. It worked. I had this thing in my head thinking that I was kind of crazy insane since I was 9 or 10. And then you went to the doctors, and then you spoke to a therapist, and then with work, and it does take work, it went away. And I was like, well, I've beaten that. Brilliant. And everyone said, when you're pregnant, it could come back again. And I was very careful not to go into the same thought processes as I did before, and I was fine. And I was like, I have absolutely nailed this, or what a star I am. And then we came to the pandemic, and then I was having talking therapy privately anyway, because I think that's a really healthy thing to do. I didn't have a specific issue, and just sort of anxiety, really, not depression, but anxiety. But that's something that I chose to do for me. And then she was like, you've got OCD. And I was like, really? I didn't really. And then we really, and because I didn't see it coming, because it was pure OCD, and some people don't like that term, but basically I did not realize that my thoughts about COVID and everybody I know and love dying was OCD, because I just thought, I'm just stressed about it, because I wasn't doing the tapping, I wasn't doing the, lining stuff up. And I would just like to say at this point that OCD is not, and it can involve cleanliness, but that's not, everyone thinks, oh, OCD, or you need things to be neat and tidy. Christ, you've not seen my man drawer. It's not that. So I just didn't see it coming. But so with pure OCD, you don't have the rituals where you touch stuff. It's just in your mind, and you just have these horrific, I really can't state this enough, horrific visions and intrusive thoughts for me. And it can be loads of different things. For me, it was, the people that I love dying, and I would see them in my mind dead or at the bottom of a cliff, or, for other people, it can be different things. It can be religious, it can be sexual based, it can be lots of different things. But yeah, I just didn't see it coming, because I didn't equate it. But then I was doing avoidance in my head to not have these thoughts. So for me with COVID, it was like, well, I can't go outside because I don't want the people that I love to die, which, fair play is a
right.
But I was lucky enough to have the therapy in place beforehand, and she really helped me through it. And it is hard. So I had to, over the course of the summer, it's called exposure prevention therapy or something. Anyway, it begins with E, and there's 3 letters, and it's an acronym. And you have to list the things that you're most scared of and give them a grade, and then you have to go and do that thing. And that was really, really hard. So for me, it was things like go into the bank and deposit a check, go to your local beach, or go to a busier place. And for me, I'm really scared of heights as well. But it was, things like go to that place with a cliff with loads of people, or go inside. And it's been really hard. And my therapist has acknowledged it, in terms of COVID and OCD, because where does just general, well, that's just sensible not to go into a busy place, stop and start, or this is over the top because this is your OCD. And that's been really, really hard to find a balance between the two. Because, before, when it was just like, if I don't touch this light switch, my mum's going to die, it was like, well, okay, well, don't do it, and then let's work through that, and your mum's not going to die. But it's right. So that it's been the hardest thing of my life, to be honest with you, and I'm really proud that I've got out the other end of it. But just so hard, so hard, because there is and I think the thing with OCD is you're never going to eliminate risk. And your brain is always like, there's risk here, but life is inherently, there's risk in everything, but it's just not overreacting to it. So yeah, it's just hard when there's a pandemic and you're a virologist and you've made a TV program about it. It's just But yeah, I would just want to tell people that you can get. It feels impossible to get through. It feels like an absolute barrier, but you can beat it for sure.
Well, thank you. And thank you for opening up about that, because, and I'm a person who I would say is sometimes an oversharer maybe. And I'll say something to someone and then feel like maybe later, like, oh, should I have told them all that or whatever? But I'll tell you right now, just in case that happens later.
It will. I can tell you that's definitely in the post.
Okay. And you definitely just have to know that someone will listen to this. And I'll let you know when they let me know. And it'll impact them and it'll help them feel okay. Because I can even tell you, like with cognitive behavioral therapy, I 100% agree with it and swear by it. It's been something that I've employed as a tool. The part of it where you, and this might've been what you did before, where you like have your thought that kind of that triggers you, right? That recurs, and you have to write down all the things, the reasons that it would be true and all the reasons that it would not be true. And then come up with the thought that's more rational. And that's been a thing. I mean, I still do that. I don't do it on paper anymore or very often, but I completely know and understand. So thank you, because I think too that this time, I mean, since March or before, for some people who never understood or experienced any sort of mental illness or mental health issue experienced one. And
for sure.
And the people who were able to talk about their experience before, I think really helped them because it was their first time, and so, well, I'm glad that you were able to get help and work through it. And it is important to have a therapist kind of on. I have one that I talk to monthly just because too. Yeah. Because it's like something will come up.
Absolutely. Do you know what? And I think the stigma is getting less so, but I remember speaking to a friend a couple summers ago, and she said, if you're not everyone's able to afford private therapy, and and I get that, but if you're privileged enough to be in a position to do that, you would spend X amount to go to a spa or go out with your friends or whatever. Why would you not? Or for me, the many streaming channels I have, I got like 6 of them. I mean, it's insane, but we won't go into that. But why would you not just invest that money in yourself?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, people will invest it in nights out.
Night out, whatever that was, I don't really remember anymore.
Yeah, we can't now. I know now. There's more money for therapy because you can't go exactly. out. So I guess overall then, do you think that for you and just in your field and what you've worked in, and it's very hard. I mean, I think being a scientist and getting to that level that you're at is really tough. Do you think without comedy or some other hobby that you would be as happy in your career, or do you think that it's helped you overall just to have something else that you do?
Oh, 100%. Yeah, definitely. And I think that stands true to anyone in any profession, really. It's just, and I do count myself as lucky because, you know, I like doing other things. I draw, not to any great shapes. It would never be put up anywhere. I like singing. I did enter the X Factor. I did. I don't like the rest of it. I mean, yeah. So I was just watching The Masked Singer earlier with my son. In 2006, I entered the X Factor and I got through 2 auditions. And then I got to see the judges, and it was Sharon, Louis, and Simon. And Louis said I had a good image. Sharon said I seemed like a really nice person. Simon said if you weren't a medical microbiologist, I wouldn't remember you. And then I sang, and then they all said no. And I said, do you want a second song? And they all said no. So yeah, so I like I like singing.
Sorry. I mean, I would say a dream is just to be insulted by Simon Cowell in a way, which probably shows that I need to stay in therapy. But yeah, like
you said monthly. I book a couple in next week, mate.
Yeah,
but yeah. So yeah, I've done that as well, and all of these things make me happy. And all of these things, but particularly like comedy and singing, come with an enormous amount of rejection. But that kind of makes you a better person as well, doesn't it? I think, like, just, yeah. I mean, we've all had the applying to do a gig or whatever. And no, thank you. You know, sending a clip in. No, thank you. We don't want you. And, you know, obviously 3 no's in the X Factor. I also did Britain's Got Talent, but that's a different thing.
Oh, wow.
I did that for comedy, and I got through like 2 rounds in that as well. And then I was so nervous as I was leaving the room in which I auditioned in. I couldn't open the door because it was like pull and it was push. And they were like, oh, my God, it was an absolute car crash. These are the things that I've done. Yeah, so yeah, these are the things that make me like, and even though I'm not a bench scientist anymore, I always identify as a scientist, and I think that's my, if you were like to chop me down the middle like a stick of rock, it would say scientist, but like all these other things and me too, and it's what makes me, and it's what makes me happy.
Yeah. Oh, that's cool. And I love that you tried out for those things because that takes a lot of guts. I mean, you know, or I don't know how they, well, I don't know how they put together the reels of like the outtakes of people too, but I always think like, oh, what if you audition and you end up on the episode where they just make fun of you? And it's like,
well, I hear they take like the top 10% of people that can actually sing, and then I don't think this is a nice thing. I think this is horrible. Like the 10% of, you know, the more sort of comedy aspect. So I'm hoping I was in the top 10%. But I was just suddenly thinking, so I did Britain's Got Talent twice. And then the second time I was at work and I was a bench scientist, and I had a new student and I was teaching her how to do hybridization. And it was like an 8-hour procedure, and it was really long. And then I'd looked on the computer, and then randomly Britain's Got Talent were auditioning in Weymouth, where I live. So I was like, well, dear God, I need to do this. I didn't know this was happening. So, and she'd only been working there for a week. I was like, yeah, no, this is quite important, but if you could just keep doing this, I'm going to go for an hour and a half. And I had to ask my boss. I was like, I know like flexi time was still in core hours, so do I need to take annual leave? And he just looked at me and he went, oh, why, Lisa? And I went, I just want to nip out and do a Britain's Got Talent audition. And he literally put his head on the desk and he was like, Jesus Christ. I mean, you don't get scientists saying that very often, do you? No. He was like, Jesus Christ, Jesus Christ. And I was like, can we just sort out the hours later? She's in the lab. There are some chemicals and viruses, but I think it will be all right. And he was like, oh, my actually. And so I literally disappeared for an hour and a half and then came back again. And then, bless her, she was like, you're my hero. That was amazing. So I inspired her not to do
I think. Yeah. No, I think that is inspiring because it's ridiculous, but then great also, right?
I mean, honestly, we would the hybridization we were doing is so involved, so many chemicals, so much stuff. And there was viruses. And it just shows you my work-life balance. How do I feel? And also why I'm not a bench scientist anymore. I was like, right, down tools, and literally just ran out the door. I didn't even have a set prepared, you know. I was like, well, I've got to do this.
Yeah.
Basically, that sums me up in a nutshell.
Awesome. Is there anything we didn't cover that you want to cover?
No, I think that's all good.
Yeah.
From
Okay. Yeah,
to BGT.
I think we did great. Yes. Yeah, we got every acronym, basically, every 3-letter acronym handled, right? So we're good. Is there any advice or like a mantra that you use that you just want to share with people? Or maybe even the best advice you got at any point?
Yeah, dream big. It's not insurmountable. You can do it. Just because it seems crazy and large, and that doesn't happen to people. It can happen, and just have confidence in yourself, even if at your lowest ebb, it doesn't. Like when I was bullied, I felt like nobody liked me and I was rubbish. But that's not true, and you can go for your goals and you can succeed.
Yeah, great. All right. Well, I have a series of questions called the Fun 5, and they're just a way to get to know a few more things about you. So the first one is really based around what I've said is based around me trying to justify what I keep in my wardrobe. But what's like the oldest T-shirt you have and still wear?
What's the oldest T-shirt I have and still wear? Oh, this is really soppy. It's a London Fire Brigade one from my partner. Ugh. Ew. I wish I would be able to say something like, oh goodness, it's one with Rosalind Franklin on, and just like DNA crystallography is ace, or something like that. Real feminist thing. But yeah, no, it's a London Fire Brigade T-shirt. Amazing.
All right. That's good. So if every day was really like Groundhog's Day, which people have been saying for a while now, what song would you have playing on your alarm clock every morning? So Bill Murray. Oh, you got it. Sorry. Say it again because I talked. All right. Black Velvet.
Alana Miles.
That was good. Nice. All right. Coffee or tea or neither?
Both. Coffee. I'm not a big caffeine drinker, but definitely coffee in the morning. Tea on a cold, wintry afternoon with a nice biscuit.
Nice.
Watching
Sounds good. All right. So can you think of a time that you laughed so hard you cried or just couldn't stop, or maybe something that gets you into that space?
I want to say, as a comic, something really profound, like, Bill Hicks' second set in Idaho in 19 Jeff. But people falling over.
You're the second person this season who will say that. Yes.
But I'm such a comedy geek, as we've established. And my favorite comic is Tig Notaro. I love everything she says. I love her delivery. It's amazing. But there is nothing funnier than someone falling over.
I have a favorite. So I have a favorite video called Grape Lady Falls, and I'll send it to you.
Please. I would, yes.
I will. Yeah, I've already shared it to someone else this week. But do you have a favorite video of that?
Do I have a favorite video of people falling over?
Such a terrible question. It's like, we sounded so like 10 minutes ago we were really like elevated, and now we brought it to this. Or I have anyway.
I really like, oh my God, anything from, and this is an English comic who's now, I like Norman Wisdom. I like Some Mothers Do Have Them with, oh my God, I can't remember his name. But that particular 1970s, 1980s, Frank Spencer. Yeah. So things like that. I just find really funny. And I once, and I found it after, time plus tragedy equals comedy, doesn't it? I used to live in North London, like I said, and then I was out walking one day in autumn, and leaves, when they're wet, can be really bloody slippery. And I was walking, and then I saw Noel Fielding, who's another comedy hero of mine, across the road. And then I slipped and fell on the leaves in front of him. I mean, if I'd have seen that, I would have laughed my arse off. But yeah, so that if I had in my mind when I fell over on the slippy leaves in front of Noel Fielding.
Was that one of those where you just landed right on your butt or your tail? Oh, great. Yeah, I did that in New York several times when I lived there on ice. Yeah, fun. Cool. All right. And the last one, who inspires you right now?
Who inspires me right now? A lot of people, mostly women. My mum, Maggie Philbin, who is my absolute hero. She was the lady who presented Tomorrow's World, which was a science program back in the 80s and in the 90s. And in terms of everything that I wanted to do in terms of science and being on television, she was my absolute inspiration. And I got to be on Tomorrow's World in a little video clip the other year, and it was amazing. And I made the remark then that back in the 80s and the 90s, I would watch this program every week. And then there was her and Judith Hahn, and then there was other male presenters, and they were just bringing like tech and science into my house. And it just never occurred to me that as a girl that wouldn't be a thing that I could do. It just made it totally accessible. So my mum and Maggie Philbin.
Nice. That's awesome. Okay. And then is there anything specific you want people to look up after they listen to this and promote about yourself?
That's a good noise on a podcast.
That's great. I don't have to add it,
Just my Twitter. I'd like more followers. It's Lisa_Dr. X. I post about science on there and jokes. Don't Google Lisa Cross, because if you do, there's a female weightlifter who doesn't wear many clothes and does adult movies, I think, which is fine. But crucially, it's not me. So when you do Google Lisa Cross, please know that that's not me. I don't have very developed biceps. Just by Twitter, just my Twitter handle. That would be great to hear what I have to say. Because sometimes, awesome. It's 50% sensible science. It's 50%, ridiculous nonsense that comes to my head that I want other people to laugh at, to like me.
Cool. All right. Well, Lisa, thanks so much. It was great just getting to know you better and also just having this conversation.
Thank you.
Really appreciate
having me. It's been nice.
Yeah. Thanks for joining me this week. You can find out more about our guest in the show notes. The music you're probably moving to by now is by Joe Mafia. Find him on Spotify. That's Joe, Maffia. And Rob Metke is responsible for our visual design. You can find him online by searching for Rob, Metke. Thanks, Rob. Let us know who you'd like to hear from or about your own experiences defining yourself outside of work at More Than Work Pod on Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter. Give us a follow. Or visit our website at rabiasaid.com. Subscribe on Spotify, Apple, or wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks for listening to More Than Work. We'll be back next week with another guest. In the meantime, while being kind to others, don't forget to be kind to yourself.